Segment 2, Gold and Black Live. Kyle Charters in a roster move replaces Stacey Clarity, and Morgan Burke joins us for Segment 2. We're going to get into an area that only Morgan really can play in, and that's law. And but we're going to try to ask some good questions just on all the changing landscape and everything that's going on in the world of college athletics. And we could devote probably 3 shows to that and get that in. We will not have time for that today. But one thing tomorrow, kind of an exciting thing, an interesting thing, is student fact that. Was as of what Stacy this morning, 4,000 student tickets have been given away to or picked up by students that aren't season ticket holders. What about that, and what's been the impetus behind that, and also the ones that bought tickets? There's some incentive in there for them too.
Yeah, I think that was the part that people missed, is that people who got their VIP or season ticket were able to get an extra ticket for 2 games. Could be a Big Ten game. So we wanted to thank those people first. And I saw some stuff out in social media where people thought we were, not taking care of the loyal people who bought tickets. That's not true. The second piece was we only have 1 week from the start of class to the first game.
Mm-hmm. Which is rare this year.
Normally you have a little bit more time to get the students engaged. And so in talking with the staff, we just said, you know what, we think we're going to be better. We want to engage the student body. They were great in BGR. The BGRI, which is for the international students, was great. And so we said, you know what, if we get them out there and they really have a good time, my hunch is a good portion of them will stay. So that the number of tickets picked up has grown from 4,000 to 5,000. Now what you don't know is how many people will come.
Yeah.
And so, we'll find out, and we'll be able to follow up with all those people too and try to make sure that they get a pro rata kind of deal so they can get tickets. But we have not done anything to student prices in about 8 years, and I don't intend to do anything. I'm not trying to. On a per-hour basis, it's less than a movie. And, I think that, there's a group of people, I was part of it in the 70s and 80s when your ticket was part of the fees. But Calvin Williams was quick to point out to me yesterday when he was playing, when Fred Akers was here, students had tickets, but none of them showed up.
That's right.
So, it's a two-edged sword, but we got some momentum going. We'll get some fraction. We scan the tickets. We know where we gave the tickets. We ought to be able to do a make good, and I'm excited. I hope they come. If you saw the excitement and the energy that they brought during their Gold Rush, holy mackerel! They get in that stadium, it'll be great. So we thought we were going to try to do something to poke it up a little bit, particularly since there's a short window between the start of classes and the first game.
How do you try and build some momentum in the community? We know sales are down with tickets, and part of that is just the excitement around the team. Winning solves a whole lot, but can you do more?
Winning does a lot. Well, yeah, but you got to make sure you do things that are intelligent, not just things that we have the Gridiron Club, which is a group that comes out weekly to spend a little bit of time with Darryl. We brought them over to the Mollenkopf this week. And what Darryl does, he took them all upstairs. They had to sit in the team meeting room, and he went through I had a number of people come back and say, and that was really great. So the word of mouth from that will be positive. We've done a whole bunch of speaking engagements around. You just have to continue to cultivate, but at the end of the day, you got to win. And you got to be a competitive product, or people are going to lose interest in you. I mean, there's only loyalty in this day and age only goes so far.
You talked earlier about the whole thing with other schools in the Big Ten, Michigan State, Iowa. We haven't really talked about that, but we've hit that in the past about other schools that use as benchmarks for projects like scoreboards and south end zones. I know Michigan State is one that you looked at. What do you see when you go to some of those schools in terms of things that you might be able to utilize here?
I've been underimpressed. I got to tell you. Some cases, people have added more suites. I'm not sure that's necessary, although there was some interest in that. Different types of suites, smaller suites. But what we've embarked with in the patio is a little bit different and unique. I'm not sure we've seen any other models. Now, bringing the 5 architectural firms in, we're going to find out. But I'm not wedded just to the college market. I think you have to look at every venue. Probably the group that's had the most success selling tickets right now is the soccer team out in Kansas City. So I think you got to get your antennas all over the country in every sport and try to figure out what's going on.
I personally like a patio as part of the permanent solution because of what you said, the 25 to 35 being disconnected, liking, the idea of going to, a local restaurant and watching together and having a good time. Could that be a part?
Absolutely. And in fact, one of the original designs we laid out was a club space with the seats up on top. It was kind of the Wrigley Field terrace seating. And there's parts that I didn't like either because I felt like we weren't capturing enough of the building. Some people want us to put tunnels in. You can do that to a point, but I have to be able to have enough safety exits to get people out of the stadium. We have very small vomitories. And if we have an electrical storm, which we've had, hopefully we won't see it tomorrow.
Yeah, we've had one about every
But
day lately.
everybody from the vomitory down goes to the field and then exits through those two corners. So if all of a sudden you make that too tight, I can't get people out of the stadium, I can't do that. Now, is it possible to create a bigger tunnel? Yeah, and we'll look at it. There were some very creative drawings. We've gotten probably beyond the one that people have seen the most frequently. We've seen 3 or 4 others. People are, have a real interest in seeing how you could put the train into the concept. Well, Tampa Bay figured out how to put a Buccaneer ship in their stadium, and the answer is absolutely. And all the feedback we've gotten from people, we'll share with the architects when they come in.
Yeah.
And one of the big events too, coming up, Purdue travels to Notre Dame and will be the last game in that series for 6 years. And we want to hit schedules here in a minute too, but Notre Dame, and the fact that Purdue will have a contingent down there. What has been the response down there from Purdue fans, and what kind of crowd do you expect in Lucas Oil?
The first thing I want to tell people is it's Notre Dame's game.
Yeah.
The game was supposed to be in South Bend this year, and we mutually agreed to move it to Indianapolis, which happens to be the 30th anniversary of the game that opened up the old RCA Dome.
That's right.
I think the price points were a little bit salty, in my opinion, but that's their prerogative. We did, as part of the discussions, get agreement with Notre Dame that we would have a better allotment of seats, and I think we're somewhere around 9,000 seats that are sold, but our seats are right behind the bench and go up. So the people are going to have a much better viewing station than they would if they were in South Bend. But it'll be interesting. I know the tickets, I don't think they're sold out at all. In fact, there's been an awful lot of advertising in Indianapolis. So, they know what they're doing. It's their game. And I know what our guarantee is. So we're in the bank on that one.
That would be the definition of their problem. You won't say it quite
No,
that way.
no. Jack and I are good friends. Right?
I know. Not going to let that go.
Are you comfortable with the schedules you put together in the future that they'll be intriguing enough for fans to make up for not being Notre Dame?
Yeah, first of all, you're gonna go to 9 league games.
Yeah.
In 2017, I think it's 2017. And we have in 2015, we're gonna have Virginia Tech here. So I think that'll be a fun game, an ACC opponent. We haven't played them. 2016, Cincinnati is back here along with Nevada. Now, people aren't too familiar with Nevada, but they run an upscale fast offense. I think they'll kind of enjoy that. We'll also get a chance later in the decade to return to Nevada. And we have a lot of interest in the Reno and area, so the Tahoe area. So we've got a home and away with Missouri on the books. We've been able to have ongoing discussions. I think Wake Forest will come back on as a home and away opponent. That may be later into the next decade. So I feel pretty good about it, but when you schedule 9 home games, you really can afford, you're trying to keep 7 for your budget if you can. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, then you really can afford 1 home and away, and you're going to have 2 buy-in games is the way it works. And so we've tried to do that. So think of Missouri and Virginia Tech as being replacements, if you will, for Notre Dame until they pop back on the schedule in 2020. But I'm mindful. I want to each year have a better opponent. But you're going to at least add 1 more Big Ten school into that mix each year. And our people would probably prefer to see a Big Ten opponent than anybody else, to be honest with you.
And we'll maybe segue into some of the more broad-stroke athletic or NCAA issues or athletic issues in terms of college athletics. But does the Power Five or all of the talk about that make scheduling more difficult for someone like you because of the Band of Five and how that may all come together over time, or is it too early to tell?
Well, it's a little too early to tell because there's 125 or so Division 1A programs, and if we're all trying to schedule Division 1A, which we are, you have to almost have a perfect matchup
Yeah.
to get it. So it's very, very challenging. It's one reason we went to 9 Big Ten games. On the other hand, for the first time in my career, strength of schedule means something.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of trying to schedule 6 victories, if you have aspirations to play up, further into the bowl system, so all of a sudden now you could be, if you had a good non-conference schedule, we've tried, with Notre Dame in there to have a decent non-conference. You literally, if you can end up 6-6, but you play competitive, your fan base isn't going to be all upset, because you've played better opponents. But if you line up 4 people you should beat in the non-conference and go 2-6 in the league, people, they can see through that, and I don't blame them. Why should I buy a ticket for that? So I'm glad that the strength of schedule means more. I'd rather bring somebody in and with a name that people understand and comparable academics, because Missouri, Virginia Tech, certainly Wake Forest, those are people who take their academics pretty serious. I think our fans will enjoy those games.
So in 2 minutes or less, what's the future of major collegiate athletics?
You tell me. You tell me.
I have no idea.
I would put it this way, in simplest terms. There are 4 different forces that are in play right now. You have the court battles. There's a number of those. You have the Congress, who's beginning to hold hearings. You've got the NCAA governance changes, and finally you have the general public. And I think over the next 3 or 4 years, you're gonna find common ground. But there's gonna be a lot of fits and starts, and a lot of rumors and a lot of concerns. But I hope we don't screw it up, because there's $2.7 billion of financial aid across divisions 1, 2, and 3 that young people for well over 100 years have been able to take advantage of. I hope we don't screw it up.
Does the amateur model at its core works?
I don't think you've ever had an amateur model.
Yeah.
Okay, I think you've had a uniquely American model, because the reality is we don't do what, for example, they do in Europe, where they have the club teams and then you have your academic. So to say that you're an amateur when you're providing a scholarship, you are providing value to somebody. You're not acknowledging that they're employees, and I don't think they are employees. So, at the end of the day, it's a uniquely American model. When we say amateur, we're really saying you don't write a check to pay somebody for their performance. That, to me, is the difference between the pro and the college model, and I don't see any appetite within the collegiate community to move in that direction.
The OBannon case has gotten a lot of attention, and you may have some limitations on how much you can talk about that, but that has been on the news. And then another case that I've heard you talk about sometimes in front of audiences, the Jeffrey Kessler case, a New York Times article yesterday. Right. Kind of an interesting case that may bear some explaining about kind of taking that model almost to a totally professional model for college sports. First, with the OBannon, the NCAA is obviously is appealing this. Right. What's your view on that?
Well, I think we need to let the courts play out a little bit, and obviously the finding is that there was a restraint of trade. So you've got to be careful about what you say, and anything that looks like you're colluding and the like gets you in bigger trouble. As a lawyer looking at the case, it was very clear to me that Judge Wilkins did not want to just throw out collegiate athletics. She was trying to find a way, and her injunction would have in effect, you would be able to still license the image of the student athlete, but in exchange, there were some things that she was going to require that you do. Number one, pay up to the cost of attendance, and secondly, this notion of some type of deferred account. That's an interesting ruling by a judge, and again, I think that'll get vetted as you work your way through the appellate process. As I remind people, we're not against the cost of attendance at Purdue. We feel pretty strongly that what we did in the 60s, we ought to put back in place. We gave that incidental expense money in the 60s, and I've given you the numbers before. What we were giving them in the 60s would be future value at very closely the numbers that are being talked about. So that's not pay for play. It's just recognizing you're not giving them a full scholarship. So we'll see where that goes. I think people are finding out as they get into the whole cost of attendance issue, there's a lot of variances that are caused not because of athletics. The system wasn't designed to do what we want to do, which is to fill the gap. It has a much broader purpose to deal with financial aid, and we could spend a whole a day on that. So what I want to do is make sure we don't go so fast we get an unintended consequence here. I think there's general agreement within the 65 schools that gap ought to be closed. And how we go about doing it, we ought to go slow enough and be thoughtful enough, get all the data out there so we don't do it in a way that has unintended consequences.
You know, you look at also Kane Coulter, that gets so much attention, and you've been kind of on the forefront of that, talking about that back in February, as I can recall. It's been on your mind probably longer than that. When you see Purdue student athletes come back, what effect, if any, has that had on them in terms of how they view things? Does it become more of a time? I mean, you have things
Right.
to deal with that with respect to student athlete involvement
Right.
with administration, but what have you seen the
You know,
impact of that?
it really hasn't been much of a topic, to be honest with you. Now, it doesn't mean they're not talking about it, but we do, you know, one of Kathy Wright-Eager's jobs is to build that leadership academy, which is to create involvement, participation, and connection with the student athletes who are connected within their program, but sometimes aren't connected across the whole of 600 student athletes. And, you know, we've had a Boilermaker Athletic Council, used to be the captain's table since 1994. So our student athletes, we engage. And I don't know why you wouldn't do that. Maybe some schools don't do it that way. I think we are going to do a better job. I've started to educate our student athletes more on the value of what is out there, not to try to justify, but I don't think they have any idea. I sat there yesterday. We taught we have a freshman class that we teach, Kathy and I, 1 hour, 5 classes in a row. It was yesterday. And so I would ask some of the kids who are on full scholarships, said, do you have any idea what if you were a normal student, what the bill would be? They didn't. That's shame on us. So, I said, well, $40,000. They went, whoa, in-state, $20,000. And then you tell them, do you realize the scholarship bill, what do you think it is? Well, $2 million, $3 million, no, $10 million. So we have an obligation, all of us as administrators. I don't want to laud it over the kids and say, I don't want them to feel like, aren't you lucky we're doing this? I'm not trying, but I do think they should respect. I know that Nancy right now, Cross, and Barb Cap are working on, can we come up with a simple system that would allow us to invoice the parents that says paid in full by John Purdue Club? Just to try to educate people that the resources are coming in are finding their way to the student athletes. Now, those who want to check, they want to be an employee, I still say, go ahead and move on to the pro leagues. Maybe the college isn't your cup of tea. And, there's going to be a lot of debates about that down the road, but that's my view.
Time for one more?
It was a rough last year. That's pretty easy to see. What's something that happened that maybe we don't know about that's a pretty positive thing?
It was a hard year in 2 sports.
Yeah.
There were a lot of other sports that did pretty good. And now I understand those 2 sports pay the lion's share of the bills. But, if you walk up to a guy like Pavel Gajcek that had been back in the NCAA and he's climbed back in there, or Rob Bradley, or you talk to some of the other sports, they really didn't do bad. 12 of those teams made postseason. But when your 2 bell cows don't produce, it creates a negative, and we understand that. But I'm not going to take away from the kids who, they had a record GPA. We've tackled some major facility projects. We've had, knock on wood, very few off-the-field incidents. We had a bad year in football and a bad year in basketball, and it gets people upset. But we got to make sure that the disappointment doesn't cause us not to look at the entire product. Because the entire product, there were some things in there. A lot of young people did great jobs, and a lot of coaches did great jobs.
Last question from me, and then we'll go to break and let you get off to your other job. In addition to being a guest on Gold and Black Live, you're the things that you're most proud of as an athletic director, and the opportunity. You're in the 4th quarter of your career. That you've said that
Right. From
that standpoint. What about that? I mean, is it what keeps you coming into work every day? Is it the opportunity to work with young people? Is it the challenge of trying to solve a couple big problems of trying to turn football around, for example?
It's a little bit of all of that. I'm going to, I have, right now, I have a very, very productive relationship with the board and the president. And if I didn't, then I'd say, I ought to move on and move in a different direction. So that's number one. Number two, the support we have had from our fans is over this lengthy period has been amazing. When you understand the physical base of the assets that we inherited and what they've done in the true Purdue fashion, brick by brick by brick, and trace through from the golf complex in '98 now to softball, we have recast the physical base. Now, that's not going to translate necessarily into wins, but it does help us in recruiting. And we were so far behind, these programs couldn't get any traction. You know, they'd get up to a certain point, and then somebody would come in and say, well, you don't have restrooms in your facility, or whatever the case may be. During that period, during this period of time, we've stayed self-supporting. I think that's a good thing. I know there's some people who don't think that, but I think it's a good thing, because I think today a parent who's sending their kid to Purdue shouldn't have to subsidize athletics. We've graduated 1,500 kids. We've had 34 consecutive semesters better than student body classroom. We've rebuilt the physical base of the assets, and we have a lot of athletic accomplishments that we've done. And I think we're just at the starting point, to be honest with you, because the obvious facility deficiencies are gone. But take tennis, for example. I know we're not going to balance our books on tennis, but we didn't build this facility until 2005. It just doesn't manifest itself in recruits in 2 or 3 years. You got to build, you got to get a good coach, and you got to build. Both those programs now are moving in the right direction. And if we're going to invest the money, we should try to be the best in all the sports. Football and basketball will never come up short on the investment. If we have the last incremental dollar to invest, we understand that you have to invest there. So, you know, I do think I can be helpful at the national level, so I'll stay engaged there. And I do intend to get football and basketball back to where they have been and where I think they will be. And I'd like to see the investment that we've made turn into a little more consistency across the board in each and every sport. And I've not lost my interest or my motivation. I have a good team of people in that department. A lot of the people don't know some of these younger people who've come in, but they're smart and they've got some good ideas. And I think our best days are ahead of us.
All right, Morgan, thanks so much for your time. We'll look forward to seeing part of those future days tomorrow. Ross-Ade Stadium tonight, obviously also big volleyball match as well.
Soccer.
And soccer too. So we've got that's right, volleyball's actually later this afternoon. But we will look forward to kicking Morgan out, not definitely, but just for
Some people would like to kick me out, I understand.
And we will bring Brian in and let him talk a little bit about the future of Purdue football 24 hours from now, and of course recruiting. So we'll look forward to that. Stay tuned the next couple minutes, and we'll be back on Gold and Black Live.